I can confirm it's now recording, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, IT. Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's, I ought to say. I'm Chairman of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this remote meeting of the committee this evening of the 10th of March 2021. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings, just so that we're all aware? It's not to stop you, but so that we're aware. No, I've had no notification. Okay. My role as chairman will continue, but the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic Services Officer, Mrs. Banks. This officer will not steer the debate, but she will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols, produce the minutes, and provide procedural advice as required. The Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Mr. Ryan O'Connell, is also in attendance. Members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to all those viewing the meeting and can only be used by members to indicate their wish to speak. Right, we're on to the attendance register. So may I now ask the clerk to take the attendance register by reading out the list of the committee members' names, and they will in turn confirm their attendance by answering present. Over to you, Mrs. Banks.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Present.
Councillor Chapeltay.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Present.
Councillor Hasty, we've received apologies for, and we've got Councillor Cox as a substitute member.
Present.
Councillor Joy.
Present.
Councillor Lewins.
Present.
Councillor Perry.
Present.
And Councillor Pearl. Councillor Pearl, I can see he's present. Let me come back. Councillor Webb.
Present.
Thank you.
Any luck with count?
Okay, he's just put in the IM. So Councillor Pearl is present. Yeah, thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Councillor Pearl. I'll now ask the clerk or our officer to read out the list of officers present and which items they're presenting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Democratic and Electoral Services Manager Ryan O'Connell for item 15, Head of Policy, Communications and Governance Angela Woodhouse for item 16, and we also have with us Principal Solicitor Jane Bolus and myself, Laura Banks, as clerk.
Excellent. Welcome, officers. On to item 1, apologies. I know we've received apologies from Councillor Hasty. There aren't any others, are there, Mrs. Banks? Don't think so.
Not that I'm aware of, Chair, no.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, substitute members. I realise, thank you, Councillor Cox, you're here. You're present as a substitute member for Councillor Hasty.
Indeed, thank you.
We have no other substitutes, do we? No other? No? Good. We'll move on swiftly to item 3, which is urgent items. We have no urgent items as far as I'm aware. Item 4, notification of visiting members. We have, I know, Councillor Atkinson and Councillor Margaret Rose, who wish to speak on item 14. I also know that Councillors Nagy and Councillor Springett wish to speak on item 16. And Councillor Spooner, you're here as a visiting member, just keeping a watching brief, I take it.
Chairman, can I just come in? I usually say, could I speak if I indicate on any item, just in case if something comes up I urgently want to speak on.
Oh, well, yeah,
right?
Councillor Nagy, as it's
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I take it there aren't any other visiting members this evening?
No, Chair, could I sorry, Councillor Spooner has had problems getting into the meeting. He phoned me and it's just saying he's got no internet connection. So he's going to listen on YouTube because I can't think of any other way to get him in the meeting.
Oh dear, that's a shame. I'm wondering if he could just wait a minute or two and then try again. And I'll ask our officer to just keep an eye open in case he comes in the lobby or something. But we'll keep an eye, and I'll still keep an eye open when we come to that item.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. That brings us on to item 5, disclosures. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? As there's nothing happening, I'll take that as none at all. When it comes to lobbying, I might have to ask all members whether or not there are any. And the officer, Mrs. Banks, I think you have to go through and list, don't you? You have to ask everybody?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Sorry, nothing to report, no lobbying.
Thank you. Councillor Chapeltay.
Yes, items 14, 15 and 16.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
None.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Yes, items 14, 15 and 16.
Councillor Troy.
None.
Councillor Lewins.
None.
Councillor Perry.
None.
Councillor Pearl.
None.
And Councillor Webb.
None.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. We're on to item 7, and this concerning any items that may need to be taken in private, but of course we have no Part 2 papers, so I intend to take all the items on the agenda in public. Is that agreed, members? Excellent. I take it as agreed. Oh, good. Somebody said agreed. Excellent. Thank you. We move on to item 8, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 27th of January. Earlier this year, and that they are found on pages 1 to 6. I move that these minutes be agreed as a correct record. Happy with that, members? If there's no dissent.
Agreed.
Excellent.
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed, members. I will sign those at a later date as a correct record of the meeting. Item 9, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions that I'm aware of. Are we in agreement on that, Mrs. Banks? We haven't had any petitions, have we?
No, we haven't.
Excellent, thank you. Item 10, question and answer session from members of the public. We don't have any members of the public here this evening, so we'll therefore move on to item 11, questions from members to the chairman. Well, you've given me an easy ride this evening, members, because there are no questions for me this evening. So we'll move on to item 12, which is the committee work programme on page 7. Am I right in saying, Mrs. Banks, that the workforce strategy is going to be the 27th of July?
That is when it's scheduled. I'll just need to check with Val that that's correct.
Yeah, okay. And of course, the date of we've got to interview the independent person for attendance at meetings, and that meeting will of course be taking place on the 31st of March and not the 30th, but I'm sure those members who are affected are already aware of that. So we therefore move on to item 13, reports of outside bodies. We have no reports of outside bodies. We're moving swiftly on to item 14. Now, I know that Councillors Atkinson and Rose have registered to speak, but first of all, we'll have the report introduced by Mrs. Banks. Please proceed, Mrs. Banks.
Thank you. So this item is reference from the full council meeting on the 24th of February 2021. The motion was presented to full council and an amendment was suggested to widen the scope of the motion to seek a review of the terms of reference for question and answer sessions. This was accepted by the proposer and the seconder and is now here in front of you for your consideration. We have supplied the briefing note that was provided at full council, but please note that this relates to the minuting of answers to questions and does not extend to the review of the terms of reference. If members are so minded, an officer report can be provided to the consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Banks. You slightly cracked up, but I'm sure we all got the gist of what you were saying. Before I go to members, can I call on Councillor Atkinson? You wish to speak on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, gist is what we're talking about, really, I suppose, in this item. Yeah, I think that the article in last week's Kent Messenger sums this up very well. However, for those of you who did not see this, I think a few words of explanation wouldn't go amiss.
We saw your picture, Councillor Atkinson.
Oh, it was horrible, wasn't it? Absolutely horrible.
I think your hair was shorter.
Yes, it was. It was having the time was locked down, but I'm looking good, actually, I think. Anyway, moving on. So I'm actually very happy that the right for the public to ask questions of the council's leader or relevant committee chairperson is enshrined within our constitution. I wouldn't want to see this changed in any way, as it gives the public a chance to air their views and concerns and helps to keep members and officers on their toes. I believe this is a great democratic benefit. In fact, while main questions have scripted answers supplied by officers, it is often the unscripted supplementaries that prove more interesting, both the question and the answer. What I'm not happy about is the fact that pretty much the only part of the meeting you can't find in the minutes is the response to the question. Paragraph 4 of the briefing claims that providing a summarised record would leave the minutes open to challenge as not reflecting what the leader or chairperson really meant or said, and reference would need to be made to the recording for the full response in any event. Well, you could argue that this is the case with summarising the rest of the proceedings. This is why the minutes of all meetings are gone through at the next meeting to ensure that all members agree they are an accurate summary of what was said and to make any amendments necessary. My proposal is simply that the gist of all answers is included in the written minutes to ensure that the whole summary of a meeting is available in one place. Paragraph 3 of the briefing note says that the answers of the chairperson do not necessarily represent the views of the committee. This may well be true, but it's the chairperson who leads the committee, and his or her views surely carry a lot of weight and will usually find agreement amongst most of the committee. The solution, in my view, to this perceived problem will be to use a wording such as: the chairperson stated that, in their opinion, it would be very helpful to anyone reading the written minutes that the gist of their response to the question be recorded in the written minutes, in addition to recording the wording of the question. And as I said to full council, this will also be of benefit to the historians of the future, who will surely be interested in the response as well as the original question. I note that paragraph 6 of the briefing states that it's YouTube's current policy that videos are retained forever. What if, in some date in the future, they change this policy for whatever reason and decide not to retain such records? They will almost certainly change policy and delete some old records, given the absolutely huge volume of material added every day, with storage growing astronomically. This is another reason why I'm suggesting that a written gist of the response would be very helpful. I would have no objection to the suggestion in paragraph 7 of the briefing note being implemented in addition, but I still maintain that the written record also needs to reflect in abbreviated form everything that was said during the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. We now have Councillor Margaret Rose. You wish to speak, Margaret?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Just to say, thank you for allowing me to speak at your meeting, and also a very big thank you to Keith because I really feel that he said everything that actually does need to be said. There was a small comment talking about possible ad hoc comments made by the chair, which are very pertinent to any question. But I really feel that the main meat, if you like, of any question and answer would be covered by Councillor Atkinson's motion, and I really feel that that is important. I feel as a new councillor, although obviously a couple of years now, it is very helpful for me to have them in front, have these answers in front of me, and be able to keep them beside so that I can read whatever I need to read. And I'm sure other councillors and members of the public will feel the same way. So very much thank you to Councillor Atkinson, and just saying that I really very much hope that this will go ahead. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome, Councillor Rose. Thank you for attending. Moving on to, I'm assuming there aren't any other visiting members. I'm keeping a close eye open. On the IMs, I can see that Councillor Webb wishes to speak. Councillor Webb, please go ahead.
Thank you. Glad Keith's brought this up because, Councillor Atkinson, because there are gaps in the minutes when we sort of look at, say, a full council minutes, and we sort of see all these questions written in full, and then we don't have the answers there. It would be nice to have some sort of response somewhere that we can follow up there. What I'm sort of looking at, the amendment that was put at the last full council meeting widened the scope of it, and it was mentioned about a terms of reference question and answer sessions, including the platform on which questions should be answered. And Mrs. Banks said about a possibility of a larger report brought to a committee to deal with the amendments, because briefing notes on Appendix A were just for the original motion. I'm just sort of thinking, our work programme is not exactly overloaded at the moment. Could a report at all come to the next meeting, which I think is June, I think, if Democratic Services could get a comprehensive report on the scoping issues of this amendment?
There could be I detect a recommendation there, Councillor Webb, but before we formalise that, I see that Councillor Nagy, make it quick, and then I have Councillor Cox, Councillor Perry and Councillor Blackmore.
Yeah, I didn't know if you was doing visitors members first. Sorry, Chairman. I just wanted to say, this is, because I've been going a while, it's something you don't really think about until someone brings it to your attention. And I think, well, that is right. And what I'd like to ask the officers, are they actually recorded anyway? If a committee wanted to see what was actually said by the chairman, would they be able to draw on that at the moment? Anyway, so if it's actually recorded somewhere, I can't see why it can't put on there. But I do agree with this, really. I think it's the one thing missing out of our democratic process, actually. But it is right. When you look at a meeting, you really want to look at a meeting, what was really recorded, because I know we record them on video or whatever, but to have the written one down as well would be sort of like a backup. So I'm totally in favour of this, really. And I think it's something we've been lacking as councillors and as a borough, I suppose. I don't know what happens in other boroughs if they record it. That's another question I've never thought to ask. Do they sort of record it in other boroughs? Are we the only ones that don't do it?
Or maybe we could absorb that, Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chairman, sorry. I do see that there are many practical issues that could come into effect here. We would have potentially reams and reams of pieces of paper that would reflect all of what is spoken. And I know that Councillor Atkinson is not saying that to capture all of it. But what I think is difficult is to term what the gist is, because you could put one angle on it or pick up on one point and put that in the minutes, and that wouldn't necessarily represent what was being said or given the gist. I did just try something while you were speaking, Mr. Atkinson, and that is see whether my phone would convert your speech into text. And I will save it and send it to you, because it was quite alarming what it actually transcribed. So if we looked to AI to be able to do this and cover this for us, I think it could bring things that would need checking, because we couldn't put them into black and white. I will leave it at that, just to say I think there could be things that we could do here. There are pieces of equipment that could be considered, and I would support bringing this back to a future meeting once those have been explored. So all I would like to say is look at the potential for the AI, because I know there is video transcribing by computers that can do this, if not only to give the titles for those that are hard of hearing on videos, which I know is something that people with disability have asked us from the residents. Why is that not been looked into? So when I was at the Kent Association for the Blind, and I know that Councillor Gooch has been there as well, they were asking us about transcribing or being able to give spoken word for those that are blind. So I think the other way around here for people who are hard of hearing and transcribing it into written titles. But so we do need to look at this more, and if it does come back, I'm sure the officers will find an appropriate way of representation. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Next I have Councillor Perry. Please, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I very much support what Councillor Cox just said about gist. When I read it, I thought, gist, what on earth does that really mean? And I'm not very happy about that word at all, actually. When I read Appendix A, I thought it was an excellent brief, by the way, by the officers. And I think if you look at point 2, where it says the purpose of the minutes of a meeting are not to provide a verbatim record, and that is absolutely right. And I think our minutes do reflect that particular objective. They're not there to provide a verbatim record, and I think we must always consider that. The other point I'd make is that supplementary answers are often off-piece. The chairman has to answer something at the time of the meeting, and that they're not written down necessarily, so they're not automatic. And the other point I would make is that the people who raise the questions, if they're that interested in it, surely they can search on YouTube. It's not that difficult. So, and I am concerned about having reams of paper on this one. I think that where it's been interpreted in the Constitution, I think is very fair and matches what are normal public service and civil service standards in minute takings. So all in all, I'm not very happy about this amendment at all, to be honest. I don't think it's necessary. I think what has been set out very clearly in the brief is to the point, and I would go. But I'm not against looking at this in the future. And Councillor Cox's point was a very good one, I think. I'm happy to keep this on the table, but I'm not happy to support this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Perry. Some interesting points you've brought out there. I now have Councillor Blackmore, and after Councillor Blackmore, I'll have Councillor Chaputay, and then Mr. O'Connell will want to come in. But Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly puzzled because I know many years ago when I first became a councillor, we used to have very detailed council meeting notes, and it was felt that they weren't necessary because we had the recordings, etc. My understanding is that we upload the meetings to YouTube, and these are kept indefinitely.
Yes.
So I am a little bit puzzled as to why we then have to have all of this transcribed, because, and I'm sorry to mention this, but in my view, this is double working. If you have a digital copy, why do you then need a written copy on paper, which will only get a little bit of the discussion? It won't have everything for the discussion. And it just strikes me this is an extra cost. And when we're looking at how we spend our money and in what shape or form we spend our money, I don't think this is a very wise way to spend the council's money. I would be really interested to know what many members of the public think, and I'm sure there's one or two who say, oh, we must have all the answers ad verbatim. But I think most of those who are, dare I say, relatively sane would look at it and say, well, actually, if you have a digital copy, that encompasses everything associated with the questions. So unless there's a reason why they're not going to be there, then I don't really see what amendment or what addition this brings.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. Before we go to Councillor Chaputay, I'd like to ask Ryan, when he does come back to us, whether or not we do have a backup, just in case things went wrong. So could you mention backup when you come back to us? But first of all, I'd like to hear what Councillor Chaputay has to say, please.
Thank you. Well, I have changed my mind on this issue at least 3 times over the course of the last few weeks. So at least I can say I have some sympathy with all the different viewpoints here. It was an excellent brief. I do understand why the member of the public asked this initially. I can understand Councillor Atkinson's point of view. I do think that Councillor Cox made a very good point about capturing the gist of what was said. There are things that I think I'm finally landing on. One is this is the most horrendous amount of work for council officers. I don't see that this could be done particularly easily. I myself use dictation software, for example, because I can't use my right arm. Long story. It's terrible. And I then have to pay a PA to type it up into legible notes. So I don't think the technology really is quite as good as we would all like. And I'm very worried and concerned about what the poor officers will have to do to try to translate the gist. And the other point at which I have wavered backwards and forwards, but I think I'm eventually landing on prefer not to do any to make any changes on this, and that is that the answers to the questions from the public are essentially the opinion of the chair. They're not a formally recorded decision in any way whatsoever. They are an opinion. I have seen the chairs and councillors themselves change their minds on a number of occasions. I'm not the only waverer. I think we are all intelligent enough, decent enough to recognise that when we acquire additional information, we can and should change our minds.
Yeah.
And thinking about it, Chairman could very well say something in his or her initial response to a member of the public that would then go a completely different way in a committee meeting, and therefore to spend an enormous amount of time, as I said, for the poor officers, because I think in practice they're the ones who would suffer from this, capturing the gist of answers that are not formal decisions, that are not formal opinions even of the council, let alone decisions.
That's right.
Feels to me like far too much work to address what is not a major problem. I feel it's disproportionate.
Very interesting points there, Councillor Chaputay. Wise words as usual. But of course, I can't predetermine on this. I know we're not a planning committee. I just thought I'd throw that in. Now, I also have Councillor Lewins and then Councillor Pell, but I did say that Mr O'Connell could come in after Councillor Chaputay. So, Mr O'Connell, did you want to come in briefly, please?
Thank you, Chairman. There's a few points to pick up on that have been said in the debate so far, so I just kind of wanted to provide some information on those before the debate continued. So on transcribing, YouTube is one of the most accessible formats available on the internet. It's one of the key things it's important to its business model, and as part of that, it includes transcription services automatically. So if you look at our past webcasts, so not the live broadcasts, but if you look at them once they're recordings on the website, you can get a transcription produced of the meetings automatically. They're not always very accurate because AI is not as good as our democratic services officers are, obviously, and I would say that. I think it's a crucial point to recognise that the primary function of minutes is to capture decisions and the process that is gone through to reach a sound decision. So there is a clear trail from the recommendations that are made to members, what's presented to decision makers and how that decision is reached, and then obviously what the final decision is and is recorded properly. That is the key function of minutes. And we know that because if you look at a cabinet member system where cabinet members have records of decision, all the rest of the minutes is stripped away and you have a record of that decision that is there to show how the decision making has taken place. So that is essentially what minutes, their primary function, is for. So when you come to the question around, and the question has been raised here, around common practice and what other places do with their minutes. Well, the view of the profession is that basically you can take or leave putting answers to questions in minutes. So we haven't done a lot of in-depth research at this point. Obviously, the amendment was made at full council with regards to question and answer sessions, etc. So there's some more research that we could certainly do there. But the view of the profession is that you can basically take or leave including answers in the minutes. But I think it's important also to note that the majority of those sort of views and the advice on that relates primarily to the answers that cabinet members give, because a lot of modern local government is geared up towards an executive system where it's cabinet members who are standing up and giving responses to questions. And there is a significant difference, certainly to my mind, between a cabinet member as a single member decision maker standing up and giving an answer to council or to a member of the public, and a chairman standing up and giving an answer, a chairman to a committee. And whilst I don't often like to disagree with members, I think Councillor Atkinson said that chairmen lead committees. Chairmen don't lead committees in that sense. They absolutely have to look after the agenda, and there are processes for getting items of business on their point of contact, but they do not represent a stronger view of the committee than any other committee member in that sense. So when they stand up and answer a question, it is the view of that individual member. Now, yes, they have a role, but it is their view. And so I think it is important then that we do take away the matter that has been raised in the expanded amended motion and look in more detail into how our question and answer sessions work as requested, because I do think we need to recognise what the value of them is, whether that's the work that they create back in the office, whether that's the value that they give to members of the public, and there absolutely is a value there. And I think, like all of us, I'm absolutely an advocate of as much transparency as possible. But I do think we need to review, as requested by council, how those question and answer sessions work. So there is some more research that the team can do to look at what other places do, particularly other places with committee systems, so that we can do a comparison there and just see how these things have been done. So that is what I would put forward as a suggestion to the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. Next I have Councillor Lewins, and then I have Councillor Pearl, and then Councillor Mrs. Blackmore would wish to come back again. But Councillor Lewins next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, it was interesting to hear what Ryan has had to say, as well as all the other members. The whole point of this, I think, is that really it's democracy, and this is the only committee that we can address transparency within our council for members to, not only members, but also, for the electorate to see what's going on. So I would like this to be investigated, and that's just all I have to say. And I think also that this has to be available to everyone, whether they have whatever type of disability they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewins. Councillor Pearl, are you able to?
Hopefully, you
good. I can hear you loud and clear. Excellent. Please proceed.
It's an ancillary point, but and it was touched on a little bit earlier, but what I'm sort of concerned about is the sort of accessibility and sort of security of the sort of video archive. I think the YouTube, if I'm looking at it, I think it goes back to the end of 2016, for example. And I'm just sort of curious as to, how far, our video recordings of meetings go back, how one accesses the more historical recordings, and the point that was made about, okay, so there's a load available, or rather stored on YouTube. Do we have our own digital backup, and how easy is that to access from a sort of archivist sort of point of view?
Yeah, good point. I think that would have to be taken into account. You're actually right, Councillor Pearl. Thank you for that. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore, did you wish to come back? Are you still there, Councillor Mrs. Blackmore?
Sorry, yes, I am.
Fire away. You wanted to comment further?
Yeah, I did. I'm still a little bit concerned because if these recordings are actually kept on YouTube and we can access them, why are we continuing to spend more money doing the same thing again? I'm sorry, no one's really answered that.
But that's a valid question, Councillor Blackmore, and I would hope that this will come out when we look into this further, because we won't be able to make a decision this evening simply because the full council, it was expanded to have a review. If it hadn't have been expanded, then we may well have been able to made a response or a decision tonight. And that brings me back neatly. I'm just making sure I haven't got anybody else that wishes to speak. That brings me back neatly to Councillor Webb. Sorry, I'm just checking the screen. It's so small, the print. Councillor Webb, you started off with your recommendation, and actually, to help you along, at the bottom of page 8,
yes,
it says the motion was widened to seek a review of the terms of reference for question and answer sessions, including the platform on which council questions should be answered. I think that sounds good to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Mr. O'Connell was wanting to sort of expand on that part, certainly. So I would sort of recommend that we look for a full report to come back to the next meeting.
Happy to second that, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, excellent. And in fact, I wanted to look at a date to get it into the work programme. But before I do, I want to be very clear. Mrs. Banks, are you happy with the recommendation? You reckon you've got the recommendation clear enough?
Yes, I believe so. So the full report will be written by officers to come back to the next meeting of the committee.
Yeah, in accordance with what full council referred to.
Yes.
Excellent, and that's to inform the whole question of it, really. Actually, I was looking at, is it 30th of June? We may have a gap. I mean, I appreciate we may not be the same committee, I may not be the same chairman, but the work needs to be done. The questions have been...
You won't be, you'll be the mayor.
Oh, yeah. I've got to be re-elected first. Thank you for that reminder, Councillor Pearl.
Perhaps Jonathan could be chairman, there you are.
Yay. Oh, yes, now don't tempt him. Come on.
Well, either way, chairman, you won't be chairman.
Okay, members, come on. Let's get it into the our officer, Mrs. Banks. Can we stick it in for 30th of June? Would that give officers enough time? Because we also want to look at, see what other committee-run councils do.
Yeah, I can put it onto the work programme for the 30th of June. Yeah.
Mr. O'Connell, you're happy with that? It's achievable because there's an awful lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah, so the team can carry out some research from now, and then we'll be able to post May and post elections and annual meeting, etc., we'll have time to pull something together.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the boundary review as well. I'm trying to make sure that the work programme is properly managed, which of course is your job, not mine. Excellent. Okay, members, thank you very much for your input on that. The Democratic Services Manager has heard all that, so I hope that the answers will be forthcoming in the report, and I look forward to reading it. That moves us on to item... Oh, I'm assuming we're all in agreement. We don't need to vote, do we? No, we're all in agreement.
Great.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. We're moving on to item 15. And this report is going to be introduced by Mr. O'Connell. Over to you.
Good evening again, members. I don't actually have an awful lot to add to the report that's in front of you. With such an important project that's going to be cast over such a long period of time, I just thought it was important to provide a bit of focus and just to let keep members updated really on the programme that's ahead of us. So what we will be doing is timetabling in touch points with the committee for them to make a number of decisions over the next year. And the first stage of which is obviously set out in 2.4, which is up to November 2021, which will be looking at the council size submission. At the bottom of this report, there is a link to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England's webpage with the technical guidance on that council size proposal template. So in essence, we will be working through that template one stage at a time before we come with a proposal to full council for them to adopt that submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. However, other submissions from other bodies, other groups, other individuals are possible, so they can follow the template or put submissions in. Every submission would need to be evidenced, but the key submission obviously here would be from the council as the body recommending to the Local Government Boundary Commission how many councillors it wants to have. So that's the first main chunk of work. The rest of the work is set out broadly in the report, just to give members an indication of the sorts of time periods we're looking at, but there is a lot of work to do here over the next few years to make sure we have ward boundaries that reflect fairly on each of the electorate and give everybody an equal opportunity to have their say.
Yeah, that's the whole crux of this, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I've got not much to add to the report, but if there are any questions, I'll happily take them.
Can I just say, I'm sorry, Councillor Blackmore, I missed your comment, and you may have been referring to our previous item about the definition of platform. Was that to do with the previous item? Sorry.
Well, it was, Chairman, because you said it relates to platform, but when you say platform, what does that actually mean?
I think it means a method of communication. I could be wrong. Can I be corrected?
So you're saying that if meetings are recorded and kept on YouTube, that's not a good enough platform? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's not good enough.
To work out what the playing field is.
Okay, can we take that into account, please, Mr. O'Connell? Get our definitions clear.
Will do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Atkinson, for your comments. Now, I thought I had a visiting member. Are there any visiting members that would like to ask any questions on this particular item, the Local Government Boundary Review? No, that's good, thank you. Are there any members that would like to make a comment before we move on? Because bearing in mind, this report is for noting, and of course we are having a briefing, which I hope that just about the world and his wife will come to, which is, I get it wrong, Mr. O'Connell, it's the 22nd, is it?
That is correct.
Oh, I've actually got it right. So members, do please come along to that meeting, that briefing on the 22nd. So members, can we consider this report noted?
Noted.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Excellent. Let us move swiftly on to item 16. And this report, I will have some visiting members wishing to speak, but first of all, Angela Woodhouse will introduce the report. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Evening, members. So I'm trusting you've all read the report, but I will quickly summarise it. So as you will be aware, Policy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of February met to consider the issues around Church Road Bottom. As a result, it was agreed that lessons be learned from the experience of the Church Road application, and that the terms of reference and lines of inquiry be suggested and presented to the Democracy and General Purposes Committee for consideration. So a scope has been developed, and it's been developed in consultation with councillors and using feedback received at the Policy and Resources Committee. And that scope is set out at 3.2. So the timeline for the review is proposed to be coming back to this committee on 8th of September. So I wanted to give enough time to do a thorough review and to make sure I've got time to speak to everyone and go through all the issues, because it's quite a complex case. The thing I would highlight, obviously the bullet points give you the key lines of inquiry, so they're the areas I will be investigating. But I will be seeking support. So at the moment I'm looking at getting some external planning advice to support me in the review, because I'm not an expert. Whilst I am knowledgeable on governance, planning, I will need support. So we are looking to get external advice at the moment. So I will have someone to support me in the review. And I'm also planning to involve as many stakeholders as possible to ensure we're as transparent as possible and get the views of all those involved in the process. So the methodology is also set out, which sets out there'll be a desktop research, there'll be interviews, and there'll be a survey of various people. And then we'll bring it all back to you in a report covering the key lines of inquiry with any findings and recommendations, and that will come back to this committee. Obviously, the scope is presented to you tonight. You can make amendments to it, or you could approve it as is, or you could agree, actually, we don't want to do a review. Policy and Resources have referred this for review, and I know a number of members are very interested and very keen that this is looked into, and I think we have some of those here tonight. But happy to take any questions. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs Woodhouse. We have our visiting members first of all. It'll be Councillors Nuggie and Councillor Springett, but I'll have Councillor Springett first, please.
Thank you, members. I'm one of the members who called for this review, and I've worked with others and with Angela Woodhouse, who produced this scoping document. Whilst it is important to review what happened in the Church Road application, which ended in members and officers in very entrenched positions, which caused a lot of frustration and anger amongst both members and residents alike, I am hopeful that the outcome of this review will lead to the introduction of better working practices to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. Councillors are expected to represent the views and concerns of residents, and that what was done in this case. But the feeling was that we were being sort of bullied into not doing that, with little or no support from officers. We are told officers advise, members decide, but that certainly wasn't the way it seemed on this occasion, and we really have to address that so that really doesn't happen again. I hope that the outcome from this review will lead to some recommended changes to current working practices, such as the involvement of ward members at an early stage in difficult cases to hopefully prevent us ending up in the same entrenched position again. Outside of this committee, I have recently raised my concerns about the poor public perception of and an almost complete lack of trust by residents in our planning process. And as a council, I think we should be looking to correct this as soon as we can. Hopefully, the outcome of this review will bring the opportunity to look at other areas in the planning system, such as effective planning enforcement, so that when things go wrong, they're seen to be addressed and put right. So I would welcome your support for this scoping document and any other suggestions that you may have to improve it. Thank you, members.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Springett. Councillor Nuggie.
Right, there you go. Yeah, I think it's a good idea because obviously this is when something like this happens, a lot of local people get involved and realise what the system is as it is. And obviously in my time, I've seen other applications like this where officers and all the official side of Maidstone Borough Council was saying, councillors shouldn't do this and do that, and then councillors go and vote the other way, and that's a bit historical. So I think it would be good for the public as well, so they can see that no matter what we say or do, at the end of the day, it's the planning inspector that comes down, and we're on his decision. And I think on this one, I can't remember his wording, when he said, "No, I totally agree, these roads are rubbish and there will be congestion, but I'm still going to pass it." And it's the disbelief of something like that. And I think most people think it's the Maidstone Planning Committee itself have all the power. And I think this review, I welcome it, because I think it will help people to realise that it's not the local planning committee have the final say in something like this. And I think it's a very good idea myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy. Next, I have Councillor Mrs. Blackmore, and then I'll have Councillor Perry. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Thank you, Chairman. We're in a really interesting situation, because I think as members, we totally respect the job that officers do. They're incredibly professional, they have a lot of knowledge, and they put up with our difficulties, shall we say, because as members, sometimes we want our own way, but we don't necessarily have the professional ability to qualify that. So I think officers do a very good job in saying, okay, this is the way we should proceed. I think often the public, the officers' reports as difficult, not necessarily representing all the views, and they feel as if members are pushed into a decision. I think the problem is there have been issues in the past where, let's say, money might have changed hands or decisions could have been influenced. I'm talking about decades ago. But as a member, we certainly get comments from the public saying, well, it's all corrupt. You're all in it together. I don't believe that's true. And I think most members of the council don't believe that either. However, when it does occur, as a member, we do our utmost to defend the reputation and the attitude of officers, whether that's a planning officer or anybody else who is working in a professional capacity for the council. That said, I do feel where members take a position and, dare I say, the planning officers take a different position, we often, when I say we, I'm talking about members, we often do not feel supported. Maybe we don't necessarily have the technical tools, and we are looking to officers saying, give us that technical ability that allows us to say no to a particular planning application. And that's where I think the difficulties lie. We've got the scars for the local plan. We had lessons learned there. Certainly for Church Road, we need to do the same. However, and I'm sorry to ramble a little bit, but obviously it's quite an emotive subject, as I'm sure you appreciate.
Yeah.
I would like to know from Mrs. Woodhouse, because I know she's very involved in dealing with complaints for the council, how many, I'm not sure if she's allowed to tell us, how many planning complaints we receive. I mean, if you take, let's say we have 10 in a week, how many are linked to planning? Is it 1, 2, 3, 9? I don't know. I just think it would help us as members to get a sort of view of what it looks like, because I certainly know from my inbox and from my telephone, members of the public often complain because they feel that decisions are unfair or unjust or just, dare I say, wrong. Yeah. They don't necessarily know why they're wrong, but they just feel gut-wise it's wrong. Yeah. So I'd like to know how many complaints we do receive. And also, if you compared it to, I don't know, let's say bin collections, how does it compare? Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Woodhouse, can you, do you have that information to hand, or would you like to send it round afterwards?
Well, I have got something I can. So we did take a report to Audit Governance and Standards in January, which had the 1920 summary. So I've just opened that up while Councillor Blackwell was talking. So I can give you sort of
2020 rather than 1920.
Oh, 2019 to 2020. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, the year. Yeah, we do the municipal year. So looking at that for development management, planning, there were 70 complaints, which is 9.7% of the complaints we receive. But then you've also got planning enforcement. There were 13 complaints. That's 1.8%. And then planning policy has 7, so that's 1%. So you're looking at about 11% of complaints relating to that we receive. 11% of those in 2019 to 2020 related to planning. But you have got some other areas. So what I'll do is I'll send everyone that table so you can see the summary and see how it compares to the other services.
Can you just give us bins, though, because that's an interesting
bins,
one.
yeah, hang on, let me look at bins.
Sorry,
so waste, that's all right. Waste, we had 295 complaints, which is 41% of our overall complaints, which isn't surprising as that's the service that hits every single household.
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
So in terms of volume,
apples with apples, aren't we?
But it'll give you an idea in terms of the volume of complaints we deal with and which areas they focus on. I was thinking where else, because council tax can be fairly high as well.
But I think the point
is actually not that high, but yeah.
Yeah, I reckon they would probably go up because the 1920 would be to the end of March.
Yeah, so this is for the full year lost, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think this particular application, Church Road, didn't come into those figures. So I've got visions of it blossoming. So it might be interesting to see if we could find that for when we have this review, if members decide to go ahead with it.
Okay. But the information is there on that audit governance and standards meeting in January if members want to have a look. And I can send you all a link so you can have a look at the report.
Thank you
if you're interested. No problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Woodhouse. Councillor Perry, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, look, first of all, I just wanted to say to you, Mrs. Woodhouse, this is an excellent piece of work because I know how sensitive this whole issue, and there was a lot of emotion. I mean, I sat on the planning committee for 2 meetings when this was discussed, and there was a feeling, and I think Councillor Springate has mentioned it as well. There was quite a lot of pressure, I think a lot of members felt. I won't use the word bullying, but I will use the word, I think a lot felt quite pressurised on this. And I think in looking at your scope, which I totally support, and I think is very well laid out, your first bullet point, I think, is incredibly important because, and some of you will know what I'm going to say here, but the great maxim of the civil service and the public service in this country is basically for officers and civil servants to advise fearlessly and implement loyally. Now, if you look at the first bullet point, I think it's very interesting what you say, which is throughout the process, including assisting with their counter argument. And I think this is very important because sometimes, sitting on the planning committee myself, I think sometimes we feel that we don't always get, sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't always get the help we need. And I think in the Church Road situation, that possibly was one of the issues that came out. So I think you put that in your first bullet point, I think is a very, very important thing to do. So I totally support that. I really do. I think one of the issues, I think, particularly with planning committee, is the hands are often tied by the policies and by the MPPF. We can only refuse items on particular, if there are policies that we can sort of refuse on. So it's not always straightforward. Sometimes the public don't always see that, I think. So what I was going to say is I totally support this. I think this is a very important thing to do. And I would like to move that we support this and move ahead. Thank you.
Seconded.
I didn't hear who seconded. Was that?
I think
near enough all of us.
Yeah, everybody seconded, included the chairman. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for this report, Mrs. Woodhouse. And excellent. As Councillor Perry, I fully support, as from the chair, Councillor Perry has said it all. I think all members who have taken part in this particular item, we've said it all. So the recommendation is totally accepted, and we look forward to having a report back on the 8th of September. Members, we're all agreed, aren't we?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very, very much indeed. No dissent. Members, thank you very much for your input this morning. Officers, thank you for your input this evening. It's been a great meeting and there's lots to look forward to. And I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.